Morning everybody, class read time now. So, where did we get up to with our story last week? We're reading George's Marvellous Medicine, aren't we? Here it is. George's Marvellous Medicine by Roald Dahl. And we've made a good crack on the book now. Can I turn the lens around? No. Hang on, pausing, turning around. Here we go, we've made a good crack on the book. So, we've introduced the characters. We've got George, Mr. Killy, we've not seen him yet, really. Mrs. Killy, she was briefly in it right at the beginning. She's not been introduced too much yet. Grandma definitely has. She is a hideous old lady, the grandma of George. And there you go, that was the first chapter, Grandma. And we've read the first. Look how scary she is. She's not a nice lady. Poor George. He gets ever so worried and a bit frightened by her. So he came up with a wonderful plan. And he's making a medicine. Now, Grandma needed medicine about 4 times a day. And it's George's responsibility, while his mummy and daddy were out, to give her the medicine. And he thought, I know, I'm going to make a brand new medicine for her. This will give her a bit of, shake her up a bit, give her a bit of a shock to the system. So last week we were reading, he started to make this medicine. He took this large saucepan, look there, and he was going all over the house, finding all different things to put in. And he went to the bathroom and put in all the lotions and potions. He went into his mummy and daddy's room and put in various other hairsprays and lipsticks and liquid paraffin, deodorant. He even went to the laundry room, put in flea powder for the dogs, washing machine bits and bobs, stain removers, things you wouldn't necessarily normally find in medicine. And the search continued because his saucepan wasn't quite full yet. So actually, he went to the outdoor shed. Now, the indoor medicine cupboard was absolutely, there you go, the indoor medicine cupboard was absolutely out of bounds, and he knew he wasn't allowed to go in there. But he was never told he could never go and look at the animal medicine cupboard. Now, he lives on a farm, so his dad's a farmer and he has lots of medicines for animals. So actually, he ended up putting in all sorts of things that the animals are normally given. Pills and liquids, all got sloshed in. This saucepan was getting quite heavy. So we're here today. Here we go. The cook-up. George has filled his pan with all those ingredients, and we're about to start the cook-up, which is potentially chapter 4. I've got some friends with me today, look. I'm going to be reading to some friends. Hi, Buzz. You all right? Looking quite comfortable. Maybe you could get one of your favourite toys or cuddly animals, snuggle up, enjoy the read with them, look at the pictures. But I'll also hold the camera, as always, over the page that I'm reading so you can follow the text with your eyes as I read. Get cuddly, get snuggled up, and enjoy the next few chapters. The cook-up. In the kitchen, George put the saucepan on the stove and turned up the gas flame underneath it as high as it would go. "George!" came the awful voice from the next room. "It's time for my medicine!" "Not yet, Grandma," George called back. "There's still 20 minutes before 11 o'clock. "What mischief are you up to in there now?" Granny screeched. "I hear noises." George thought it best not to answer this one. He found a long wooden spoon in a kitchen drawer and began stirring. The stuff in the pot got hotter and hotter. Soon the marvellous mixture began to froth and foam. A rich blue smoke, the colour of peacocks, rose from the surface of the liquid, and a fiery, fearsome smell filled the kitchen. It made George choke and splutter. It was a smell unlike any he had smelled before. It was a brutal and bewitching smell, spicy and staggering, fierce and frenzied, full of wizardry and magic. Whenever he got a whiff of it up his nose, Firecrackers went off in his skull, and electric prickles ran along the back of his legs. It was wonderful to stand there stirring this amazing mixture and to watch it smoke blue and bubbling and frothing and foaming as though it were alive. At one point, he could have sworn he saw bright sparks flashing in the swirling foam. And suddenly, George found himself dancing around the steaming pot, chanting strange words that came into his head out of nowhere. Fiery broth and witch's brew, foaming broth and riches blue, fume and spume and spoondrift spray, fizzle, swizzle, shout, hooray! Watch it sloshing, swashing and sploshing, hear it hissing, squishing, spissing. Grandma better start to pray. Brown paint. George turned off the heat under the saucepan. He must leave plenty of time for it to cool down. When all the steam and froth had gone away, he peered into the giant pan to see what colour the great medicine was. It was a deep and brilliant blue. It needs more brown in it, George said. It simply must be brown, or she'll get suspicious. George ran outside and dashed into his father's tool shed where all the paints were kept. There was a row of cans on the shelf, all colours, black, green, red, pink, white and brown. He reached for the can of brown. The label said simply, dark brown, gloss paint, 1 quart. He took a screwdriver and prized off the lid. The can was 3/4 full. He rushed it back to the kitchen. He poured the whole lot into the saucepan. The saucepan was now full to the brim. Very gently, George stirred the paint into the mixture with a long wooden spoon. Aha! It was all turning brown, a lovely, rich, creamy brown. "Where's that medicine of mine, boy?" came the voice from the living room. "You've forgotten me! You're doing it on purpose! I shall tell your mother!" "I'm not forgetting you, Grandma," George called back. "I'm thinking of you all the time. But there is still 10 minutes to go." You're a nasty little maggot," the voice screeched back. "You're a lazy and disobedient little worm, and you're growing too fast." George fetched the bottle of Grandma's real medicine from the sideboard. He took out the cork and tipped it all down the sink. Then he filled the bottle with his own magic mixture by dipping a small jug into the saucepan and using it as a pourer. He replaced. Had it cooled down enough yet? Not quite. He held the bottle under the cold tap for a couple of minutes. The label came off in the wet, but that didn't matter. He dried the bottle with a dishcloth. Now, all was now ready. That was it. The moment, the great moment had arrived. "Medicine time, Grandma," he called out. "I should hope so too," came the grumpy reply. The silver tablespoon in which the medicine was always given lay ready on the kitchen sideboard. George picked it up. Holding the spoon in one hand and the bottle in the other, he advanced into the living room. Grandma gets the medicine. Grandma sat hunched in her chair by the window. The wicked little eyes followed George closely as he crossed the room towards her. "You're late," she snapped. "I don't think I am, Grandma." "Don't interrupt me in the middle of a sentence," she shouted. "But you'd finished your sentence, Grandma." "There you go again," she cried. "Always interrupting and arguing. You really are a tiresome little boy. What's the time?" "It's exactly 11 o'clock, Grandma." "You're lying as usual. Stop talking so much and give me my medicine. Shake the bottle first, then pour it onto the spoon and make sure it's a whole spoonful." "Are you going to gulp it all down in one go?" George asked her. Or will you sip it? What I do is none of your business, the old woman said. Fill the spoon. As George removed the cork and began very slowly to pour the thick brown stuff into the spoon, he couldn't help thinking back upon all the mad and marvellous things that had gone into the making of this crazy stuff. The shaving soap, the hair remover, the dandruff cure, the automatic washing machine powder, the flea powder, for the dog, the shoe polish, the black pepper, the horseradish sauce, and all the rest of them. Not to mention the powerful animal peel and powders and liquids and the brown paint. Open your mouth wide, Grandma, he said, and I'll pop it in. The old hag opened her small, wrinkled mouth, showing disgusting pale brown teeth. Here we go, George cried out. Swallow it down. He pushed the spoon well into her mouth and tipped the mixture down her throat. Then he stepped back to watch the results. It was worth watching. Grandma yelled, "Ow!" and her whole body shot up, whoosh, into the air. It was exactly as though someone had pushed an electric wire through the underneath of her chair and switched on the current. Up she went like a jack-in-the-box. And she didn't come down. She stayed there, suspended in mid-air, about 2 feet up, still in a sitting position, but rigid now. Rigid means like hard. She'd stayed in the same sitting position. Oh, there she is, you see. Frozen, quivering, the eyes bulging, the hair standing straight on end. Is something wrong, Grandma? George asked her politely. Are you all right? Suspended up there in space, the old girl was beyond speaking. The shock that George's marvellous mixture had given her must have been tremendous. You'd have thought she'd swallowed a red-hot poker the way she took off from that chair. Then down she came again with a plop, back into her seat. Call the fire brigade, she shouted suddenly. My stomach's on fire! It's just the medicine, Grandma, George said. It's good strong stuff. Fire! The old woman yelled. Fire in the basement! Get a bucket! Man the hose! Do something quick! Cool it, Grandma, George said. But he got a bit of a shock when he saw the smoke coming out her mouth and out of her nostrils. Clouds of black smoke were coming out of her nose and blowing around the room. By golly, you really are on fire, George yelled. Of course I'm on fire, she yelled. I'll be burned to a crisp. I'll be frazzled to a frizzle. I'll be boiled like a beetroot. George ran into the kitchen and came back with a jug of water. Open your mouth, Grandma, he cried. He could hardly see her for the smoke, but he managed to pour half a jug down her throat. A sizzling sound, the kind you get if you hold a hot frying pan under a cold tap, came up from deep down in Grandma's stomach. The old hag bucked and shied and snorted. She gasped and gurgled. Spouts of water came shooting out of her, and the smoke cleared away. The fire's out, George announced proudly. You'll be all right now, Grandma. All right, she yelled. Who's all right? There's jackery jumpers in my tummy. There's squigglers in my belly. There's bangers in my bottom. She began bouncing up and down in the chair. Quite obviously, she was not very comfortable. You'll find it's doing you a lot of good, that medicine, Grandma, George said. Good! She screamed. Doing me good! It's killing me! Then she began to bulge. She was swelling. She was puffing up all over. Someone was pumping her up. That's how it looked. Was she going to explode? Her face was turning from purple to green. But wait, she had a puncture somewhere. George could hear the hiss of escaping air. Wonder where her puncture could be. She stopped swelling. She was going down. She was slowly getting thinner again, shrinking back and back slowly to her shrivelled old self. "How's things, Grandma?" George said. No answer. Then a funny thing happened. Grandma's body gave a sudden sharp chair and landed neatly on her 2 feet on the carpet. "That's terrific, Grandma!" George cried. "You haven't stood up like that for years. Look at you. You're standing up all on your own and you're not even using a stick." Grandma didn't even hear him. The frozen, pop-eyed look was back with her again now. She was miles away in another world. Marvellous medicine, George told himself. He found it fascinating to stand there watching what it was doing to the old hag. What's next? He wondered. He soon found out. Suddenly she began to grow. It was quite slow at first, just a very gradual inching towards, up, inch by inch, getting taller and taller, about an inch every few seconds, and in the beginning George didn't notice it. But when she was past the 5-foot mark, 5'6" mark, and was still on, and still, but when she was past the 5'6" mark and was going on up towards being 6 foot tall, George gave a jump and shouted, "Hey, Grandma, you're growing! You're growing up! Hang on, Grandma, you'd better stop now or you'll be hitting the ceiling." But Grandma didn't stop. It was a truly fantastic sight, this ancient, scrawny old woman getting taller and taller, longer and longer, stick being pulled upwards by invisible hands. When the top of her head actually touched the ceiling, George thought she was bound to stop. But she didn't. There was a sort of scrunching noise, and bits of plaster and cement came raining down. "Hadn't you better stop now, Grandma?" George said. "Daddy's just had this whole room repainted." But there was no stopping her now. Soon her head and shoulders had completely disappeared through the ceiling, and she was still going. George dashed upstairs to his own bedroom, and there she was, coming up through the floor like a mushroom. "Whoopee!" she shouted, finding her voice at last. "Hallelujah! Here I come!" "Steady on, Grandma," George said. "With a hey, nonny, no, and up we go!" she shouted. "Just watch me grow." "This is my room," George said. "Look at the mess you're making." "Terrific medicine!" she cried. "Give me some more!" "She's dotty as a doughnut," George thought. "Come on, boy, give me some more!" she yelled. "Dish it out! I'm slowing down!" George was still clutching the medicine bottle in one hand and the spoon in the other. Oh, well, he thought, why not? And he poured out a second dose and popped it into her mouth. "Oh!" she screamed, and up she went again. Her feet were still on the floor downstairs in the living room, but her head was moving quickly towards the ceiling of the bedroom. "I'm on my way now, boy!" she called down to George. "Just watch me go!" "That's the attic above you, Grandma," George called out. "I'd keep out of there. It's full of bugs and boggles." Crash! The old girl's head went through the ceiling as though it were butter. George stood in his bedroom gazing at the shambles. There was a big hole in the floor and... oh my goodness, another in the ceiling, and sticking up like the post between the two in the middle was the middle part of Grandma. Her legs were in the room below and her head was in the attic. "I'm still going!" came this old screechy voice from up above. "Give me another dose, my boy, and let's go through the roof." "No, Grandma, no," George called back. "You're busting up the whole house." "To heck with the house," she shouted. "I want some fresh air. I haven't been outside for 20 years. By golly, she is going through the roof, George told himself. He ran downstairs. He rushed out of the back door to the yard. It would be simply awful, he thought, if she bashed up the roof as well. His father would be furious, and he, George, would get the blame. He had made the medicine. He had given her too much. "Don't come through the roof, Grandma," he prayed. "Please don't." And we're going to leave it there for today. Leave it on a bit of a cliffhanger. Is she going to go through the roof? She's definitely grown a huge amount. We'll find out next week. What's going to happen next? What's gonna happen next? So it left us on a cliffhanger. What's going to happen next? Your job today... Oh, hey, Smudgy. Your job today... Hiya, boy. I know. What are they going to do? What? You've got to decide... make a prediction. Make a prediction what's going to happen next in the story. So you can write your title, what's going to happen next, like I did, and I want you to draw a picture of what you think is going to happen next in the story to Grandma or to George, and you can label your picture. Sorry, the light's terrible on here. I'm losing the plot a bit. There we go. Draw a picture of it, and then you can label it, annotate that picture to help whoever's looking at it get a better idea. I mean, it could be anything. Maybe all of a sudden she could blink and she could be tiny again. Maybe she could grow wings and fly out the house. Maybe her legs will carry on growing and growing and growing until her head touches the moon. I'm sure you've got even better ideas than that. So have a think. Draw it out, you can colour it in, label it with your predictions. Keep it safe and you'll find out if it comes true next week when we carry on with the story. Miss you all. Take care, be safe, be good. Bye.